Hi, my name is Jeff Pfeiffer. I'm an attorney at the Lopez Law Group. I mainly specialize in personal injury cases. This is our podcast where we try to answer a lot of common questions that our firm receives by people who are looking for representation, whether it be related to an auto accident or a slip and fall or a dog bite. I try to cover a lot of the questions that I typically get, and one of those more popular questions is ultimately, will my case go to trial? How long is this going to take? Is it something that there's going to have to be a complaint that's filed with the court? Am I going to be deposed? Is there going to be a mediation? And that's something that is, I tell everybody, it doesn't happen on every case. Typically, almost all of the cases, there are some rare exceptions to this, but 99.9% of cases, they start out in what's called pre-litigation. Pre-litigation is the process where you're going to a doctor. I, as the attorney, am figuring out what kind of insurance coverage there is. And we're doing all of this without actually filing a lawsuit. So there's no complaint that's drafted. You're not going to be going before a court. There's no judge involved at this point. This is just the phase that happens prior to that happening, where everybody sits down and tries to figure out what's your case worth. Is there going to be an offer? Is insurance company willing to compensate you for your injuries? Is this something that we can settle outside of court? That is what a pre-litigation process is, a settlement outside of court. Obviously, if there is no settlement at that point, which can happen for a variety of reasons, whether if they don't make an offer, they don't feel like they're at fault. And when I talk about they, I'm referring to the at-fault party and the insurance companies. So if they don't feel like they're at fault for that accident, ultimately, if there's an offer, but the offer is just way too low, and it's not something that we can accept as far as the dollar figure needing to be where it's supposed to be so that we can take care of your bills and put some money in your pocket and take care of you, then a lawsuit may be required at that point. So in pre-suit, again, I would say on average, about 80% of the files that come through our office and through almost any office who handles personal injury in the state of Florida, about 80% of those are going to settle out. It may be more than that, but they usually will settle. Insurance companies don't want to have to pay an attorney to fight it in litigation. They don't want to have to go through the time that's required, because a lot of cases, once the lawsuit's been filed, it can go on for many years. You could be looking at 2, 3, 4 years before a case ultimately gets resolved. But like I said, if you're in that pre-suit process and we don't get an offer, or we get an offer but it's just not enough as far as a dollar amount that we're going to need to settle it, then the next step is that we're going to have to file a lawsuit. We're going to have to draft a complaint. We're going to have to file it. You do have 2 years from the date that you're involved in that accident to go ahead and file that complaint. So you have some time in pre-suit to negotiate and figure out if a lawsuit's necessary. But ultimately, if the offer is not where we need it to be, then it's going to be required. Ultimately, the attorney's going to have to get authority from you before we officially file that lawsuit for you, because once that's done, your name is on the public records in the county, and it becomes a long process. You will be deposed. A judge will be assigned to the case at that point. There will be a defense attorney. That if defense attorney is going to want to take your deposition, they're going to want to sit you down. They're going to want to talk to you for a couple of hours about what happened. You may at some point have to go before a courtroom and give some testimony if ultimately a trial is required, which even among the cases that actually get filed on, a very small percentage, maybe less than 2% of cases that even get a lawsuit and end up in front of a court actually go before a judge and a jury for a trial. So, after you file that lawsuit, there's still a high likelihood that it settles out just like it would in pre-suit. It's just that a lawsuit was required and a judge was required to be assigned to that case before everybody sat down and came to a number that they could agree on. Usually that would happen at what's called a mediation. So you file your complaint, and then about 7 or 8 months later, after you've gone through the discovery process, you'll sit down at a mediation. And everybody will hopefully at that point come to an agreement as far as what your case is worth and what they're willing to compensate you. And then it settles out at that point without the need for you to ever step foot in a courtroom, have a jury, decide your fate. A lot of that stuff happens at the very, very end, and those are only cases that just absolutely cannot get settled, which again is about 2% of cases or less that come through the door. So, not necessarily if the question that comes in, a client asks me, am I going to have to go to trial, and is this something that is going to have a lawsuit? Not necessarily. Nearly all of the cases that I get, they'll settle in pre-suit without ever having to file a lawsuit, without ever having to put together a complaint. You'll never see a judge. You'll never see the inside of a courtroom. Your deposition will never be taken. But, just be aware that if we don't get the number that we're looking for, and ultimately the settlement amount isn't where we want it to be, or there is no offer, it may end up there. It's just the odds are that it's going to settle outside of court, and you're never going to need to see the inside of a courtroom. So so not necessarily, if that's the fear that people have, that they're going to be deposed and they're going to have to go before a jury and give testimony, the things that you see on television, just know that that rarely happens. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you do need legal representation, we would hope that you'd give us a call here at the Lopez Law Group. We help with auto accidents, slip and falls, dog bites, any sort of personal injury action where you may have been injured due to somebody else's negligence. We're here to help you. You can give us a call. Our phone number is 727-933-0015. Thanks.